So SA has amazing set of programming nowadays, and many of those programs started back in the 80s. So do you want to touch on some of the beginning programs such as Senior 100, Illini Comeback, Be Apart from the Start, and the President's House Reception?
Okay. Well, we really started right away, you might say, after homecoming. It was only about 3 weeks after homecoming that the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs had been a graduate, I think a master's degree at that time before his doctorate, but it was at Purdue. And they had a program, long-standing, called Old Masters Program. And it involved, well, it was sponsored by their Student Affairs Office, and it really wasn't a student organization, but they invited back 12 or so non-alumni that were recognized as stars, you might say, across the country, mature adults, basically. And it was a weekend or a week-long program at Purdue. And they would talk to various groups, and there would be auditorium programs. But at any rate, John Graff and Scott Casinas, members at that time, and I went over to West Lafayette one evening and talked to the students and listened to some of the programs on the schedule that night, speaking programs. We came back, drove back, and talked in the car about maybe trying to modify that program that might really work for the university or for the Alumni Association, for our organization also. And we actually did 2 programs that following year in 1980. One was in the spring and one was in the fall. The fall one was in conjunction with homecoming. And I think we had 3 speakers on each program. They were selected by the students. And it was kind of interesting how the names popped up. I'm not sure in each case what happened, but in many cases I think the students talked to their parents, and they knew of people that were of interest in their communities, and we invited those people. They were not necessarily national names, but they were at least regional names and graduates of the university. And Ann Davenport was our first co-chair or chair of that event in the spring. John Graff, again, he was kind of my shadow advisor. He really, of course, knew the students better than I did, but he was great about tagging people that he thought would be the best suited to do different things. And then he would tell me, and then I would act like I knew what I was doing, you know. But no, it was a great group, of course, all the way through. But that program seemed to work from the beginning. And we didn't really change it very much, and offered it after that just once a year.
And that was the Illini Comeback.
That was called the Illini Comeback, right.
And why did you decide to make it with homecoming?
It just seemed a natural. We used usually one of the speakers or one of the guests that came back to be in the pep rally, like a special guest on the stage. Even, I should have mentioned back with homecoming, kind of at the last minute, Josh decided to get, or try to get, Senator Percy from while he was living in Chicago at that time. He was in his later years, but I remember 2 of our students got to go on a university plane up to Chicago and pick him up, and Josh had made the arrangements. He knew Senator Percy pretty well, and I don't know, those things just sort of all worked so well.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the next program that developed.
Oh, the next program that developed, Senior 100. Senior 100 really came earlier, Kip. That was a program the Alumni Association had actually started themselves. And the selection, I believe, I'm right, in that it was done by Illini Union Board members. But we took it over right away, so I guess it would have been in, well, yeah, in 76 probably, but that wasn't really what I call a program, but it was a presentation at the particular time of the year, of course, in May. And it was like it is now, an application selection, and at that time, initially it was a group of students, and I think we may have had some administrators also involved in it.
So then I guess you could talk about your trip to Case ASAP and then the development of Be a Part from the Start.
Okay, yes. We came home from that conference. I think it was in September of that year.
Of 83?
Excuse me?
1983?
This would be 83, yes. And I had mentioned to Terry on the way home, she had seen the presentation and I had, that we should consider that as something. And I didn't hear from Terry for a while. And she, on her own initiative, had tagged another member who was a member of her house, who was Krista Walton at the time. And they had gone together to the Vice Chancellor's office and talked to him about it. And there was an academic program at that time that was the main program during the first night or second night of New Student Week.
So it's convocation.
Yes, right. The deans in their robes and all that. But it was voluntary and the attendance had been dropping off. And the Vice Chancellor again made this program. He saw the tape of it from Penn State. We didn't change the name of it. We did the skits, maybe not the same skits, but we had basically the format of that program just transferred almost entirely in its entirety. But he made the way for us in changing those two programs, which, you know, I didn't know that it had been done until the two of them had it set. They had the approval all made and I wasn't really directly involved. So that kind of gives you a feel of the capabilities of the members, and you've experienced the same thing, Kip. But it's just amazing what they can do on their own, too.
Yeah, so Be a Part from the Start kind of took some name changes over the years. Illini First Night,
yes,
it was called, and now it's called Illinois Sights and Sounds.
Right.
And it's held each, the Saturday or Friday or Saturday before school starts. It introduces students to, the marching Illini, the different dances, RSOs they can get involved in. And it's held at Memorial Stadium.
Right.
So that's kind of how it looked then. How did it look in its first year?
It was the first 2 years we were in the auditorium, and then we went to the Assembly Hall, and that was where it was still when I retired. Right? So it had a life, didn't it? Yeah. Even though with name changes and some major changes, it was still the way to. I thought the name of it just was perfect, encouraging students to get involved from the very start.
So convocation at the time was kind of dwindling. How was the reception of Be a Part from the Start?
Well, it wasn't required for students to attend, but we were overfilling the auditorium, hence why we went to the Assembly Hall. And when we did, we played to the west side of the Assembly Hall, and although they were the residence halls at that time, the RAs and so forth, there was some pressure on the students to attend.
Yeah.
And so that helped make the crowd even bigger than it had been at the auditorium. But it fit very well for all those years.
I know 2 years ago at Illinois Sights and Sounds, I think we had 6,776 students that attended, which was about 90% of the freshman class.
Right.
It's a program that, SAA really loves. It's a lot of our favorite programs. So I just kind of wanted to kind of hit on the start of it and how that evolved over the years.
I'm not sure what our audience was, but it was 6,000, 7,000 probably and one of the things about doing things as an organization, especially when you're doing larger events, is that so much of it isn't charged back to you. The Assembly Hall is rent-free to a student organization. Now, not many student organizations are able to utilize that, but the auditorium was at no charge to a student organization, even the stadium. When we did that later with the pep rally, in the years we went to the Rose Bowl, and the year after that, there was no charge for any rentals and so forth with that. So that was surprising in a way, and it helped us financially, certainly, in doing those type of events.
I know we skipped forward a little bit in the sequence. Can we jump back to the President's House reception?
Yeah. Going back a bit to 1981, we thought that we should have a program for graduating seniors. This would be before final week, and it was on a Saturday afternoon that we first tried it. And Charlie Hurleman was our chairman that year, and we held it on a flatbed truck with a band and some refreshments. That area now is part of the Experimental Gardens on South Lincoln Avenue, just behind the President's home. And during that afternoon, well, first of all, I remember Charlie and I being in the Illini Union just before going out there. Charlie was changing clothes, and he said, "I'm going to call the TV stations." And so he did, and overhearing the conversation, it went something like, "I called the other two stations, and I just wanted to make sure you were informed too, that we were going to have this event out on South Lincoln Avenue." And one of the three stations came and videoed it, or part of it. And the president and his wife happened to be in their backyard and heard the noise again and came over and asked what was going on. And this one station actually interviewed President Eikenberry about current events, I guess at the time, or university events at the time. But a couple weeks later, and we had a couple hundred students show up, it wasn't a big affair, but they said, we were thinking, Mrs. Eikenberry called and said, we were thinking about your event and wondered if we could co-sponsor it with you. Like, it should be the other way around, and that we would like to co-host the event the following year in our backyard on commencement morning with some refreshments, and that was the start of that event.
So the President's House reception on commencement, which is still held today. We're not as active in the planning of it, but SA still helps staff the program.
I remember 2 students were selected to be with the Eikenberrys at the front door as the people came through the house to the backyard. It was very successful in the beginning. I can't tell you numbers, but a lot of people, a lot of the parking lot around the president's home to the rear near the Portfield lab were filled with cars, and it was successful from that year on.
And this was the initiation of the bookend events with this at the end of the year and and be a part from the start at the beginning of the year to bookend the student experience.
Thank you, Kip. That's very well said.
Yes.
Yeah. And then just one last event we should touch on, and that is campus class gift. It had a sort of intermittent history from the beginning back in 1871. The first class gift was a clock that a student helped design with the help of a staff member in mechanical arts at the time, and it was in University Hall, which was the building that preceded the Illini Union. And this would have been in the early 40s, the start of the war years, when University Hall was torn down and the Illini Union constructed at that same location. And from there, there were many years. There was a class gift. It could have been a rock, or it could have, as simple as that, or it could have been something much more elaborate. But we picked it up probably around 1985 and had it for those years until I retired. And I think it was a good program. The students enjoyed it. They were able to collect dimes and quarters and dollars and so forth from students over a period of time in the spring. And it varied, but we had a program for lighting on the undergraduate library roof. We had the foreign language building walk on, I think it was the north side of that building. Near Harker Hall was a public speaking area with benches that was done. I forget all the gifts, but those were several of them. And it was something I don't think has been picked up since then, but a program that I think was very, very, very good to have had.
Yeah, that's certainly a program that I think that could be in the future. This one might be restarted again by